Welcome to round 12 of 2018 NASAT. The team on my left is Ohio A, and the team on my right is Illinois A. And this is toss-up 1. A non-mathematician, Friedrich Gauss, described how a party to this agreement rejected the idea of a wordy preamble. After this agreement was signed, one of its signatories joked that if England had dominated the world, that was due to the stupidity of other countries. A human chain was formed stretching 400 miles on the 50th anniversary of this agreement in a...
Molotov-Ribbentrop.
Yes.
Nice.
A map named for this adjective is the mu=2 case of the tent map and is a common example of chaotic behavior in a simple nonlinear system. For 10 points each, give this adjective that also names an S-shaped or sigmoid function used to model population growth with the general form L all over 1 plus e to the negative kx.
Logistic.
At every vertical line, the bifurcation diagram of the logistic map gives this set for its iteration at that r value. This is the set toward which a system evolves given varied inputs, and when it exhibits a fractal structure, it is called strange. Answer?
Random.
Attractor. This constant is the limit ratio between each bifurcation interval to the next in the logistic map, and is thus the ratio between the diameters of each successive circle on the real axis of the Mandelbrot set. Not much has been proven about this constant, not even that it is transcendental.
Well, I'm trying to think of constant. I don't know.
Yeah.
Answer. It's the first Feigenbaum constant. 10. Toss up. A contemporary review called this painting a very crazy piece of Spanish madness and a glass of iced water which each visitor gets full in the face. An essay about this scene argues that the presence of conflicting class markers upset its first audience. That essay about this painting's choice was by T.J. Clark.
Modern Olympia.
What's your answer?
Modern Olympia.
No. The central person of this painting has a black lace tied around her neck, and much of her hair blends into the Japanese-style screen behind her. A black cat stands with its tail up in the far right of this painting, and an African servant holds a bunch of flowers while looking at the title woman in this scene. For 10 points, name this painting that depicts a nude woman lying on a bed with a flower in her hair by Edouard Manet.
Olympia.
Yes. Bonus. Though it is usually not translated due to cultural sensitivity, this man was converted when his teacher Ramakrishna sent him into terrifying mystical ecstasy by placing his foot on this man's testicles. For 10 points each, name this Hindu monk a major force in the revival of Hindu identity and nationalism, who traveled to the United States for the Parliament of World Religions in 1893.
Swami Vivekananda.
Vivekananda introduced this practice to the West. Since then, this spiritual discipline has been reduced to its physical components as a form of exercise and isolated from its religious context.
Yoga.
Vivekananda was initially reluctant to worship before idols until, at Ramakrishna's suggestion, he went to a temple at Dakshinaswar to pray to this goddess for financial security. When he was there, he had a mystical experience and prayed for nothing but knowledge and devotion. This goddess with dark skin is often depicted dancing atop her consort Shiva.
Cardi.
Yes. 30. Every 30 you get Smarties after the match. Toss-up 3. The regioselectivity of a reaction of this kind that uses cerium trichloride in an alcohol solvent can be explained in terms of HSAV theory. A reaction of this type commonly used on aromatic systems uses an intensely blue electride salt derived from the addition of an alkali metal to liquid ammonia and generates non-conjugated dienes. Disulfide bonds can undergo a reaction of this type with BME and DTT, which is used to denature proteins. One of these reactions is carried out under strongly basic conditions and relies on the formation of a hydrazone followed by loss of nitrogen gas. DIBALH and lithium aluminum
Reduction.
Yes.
Housewife.
Although he also played soprano saxophone, Sidney Bechet performed pieces such as Blue Horizon on this instrument. For example, teach name this woodwind instrument Also played by band leaders Woody Herman and Benny Goodman, George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue opens with glissando for this instrument.
Clarinet.
This clarinet-playing bandleader, a rival of Goodman, wrote a concerto for clarinet that ends on a glissando up from an altissimo G to C. His hits include Summit Ridge Drive, played by his Gramercy Fry, and a version of Cole Porter's Begin the Beguine.
Shaw.
Shaw's band briefly employed this black singer, who quit after being asked to use the service elevator at the Lincoln Hotel. She co-wrote God Bless the Child with Arthur Herzog Jr.
Okay. I think it's Fitzgerald. That's one. Fitzgerald.
It's Billie Holiday. 20 points. Toss-up 4. The left hand repeats the chord D, G sharp, A in quick eighth notes to open this composer's piano piece Ostinato. This composer wrote a very short Opus 14 piano suite, and in another suite from his piano year of 1926, a run of chromatic...
Bartok.
Yes.
I almost felt it.
This man used a spike hidden in a plate of pasta to escape with Father Balbi from a Venetian prison for 10 points each. The Prince de Ligne encouraged what man to publish his memoirs, the Histoire de ma vie, after hearing how this Italian man had lived a life exciting enough to make him a byword for promiscuity.
Casanova.
This Hungarian author described how Casanova secretly got back to his life of promiscuity in his novel Casanova in Bolzano. He described a long-awaited reunion in his novel Embers. Sandor Marai. Casanova names a restaurant of this kind in Anthony Pohl's A Dance to the Music of Time. Immigrants to London run this kind of restaurant in Timothy Moe's Sour Sweet.
Chinese restaurant.
Or 20. Toss-up 5. This cabinet position was once held by a man named for a Liberian tribal chief who aided that man's grandfather. A man nominated for this cabinet post by George W. Bush was forced to pull out after revelations that he hired an undocumented immigrant as a nanny. Bernard Carrick was unsuccessfully nominated to this post, which was also held by a woman who preceded Jan Brewer as Arizona's governor. The first woman to hold this post resigned to become president of the University of California system. This cabinet position was first held by Tom Ridge. It was held during the Obama administration by Janet Napolitano.
Secretary of Defense.
No. For 10 points, name this cabinet position created after the 9/11 attacks to protect the U.S.
Head of the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay, yeah.
You were correct.
Yeah, I just have Homeland Security as underlined, and that stuff is like common knowledge enough, so. Alright, your bonus. This scientist shared the 1954 Nobel Prize with Walter Botha for 10 points each. Name this physicist awarded the prize for determining that probabilities are proportional to the square of the wave function.
What? That's like, I know that.
Answer? It's Max Born. The Born rule depends on this mathematical theorem of self-adjoint matrices. This theorem expresses matrices as a matrix with orthonormal vectors in columns times a diagonalized matrix times a matrix with orthonormal vectors in rows.
Spectral theorem?
The approximation named for Born and this other scientist separates the wave function of the nucleus and electrons of a molecule. This scientist played a major role in the development of the atom bomb but had his security clearance revoked when he opposed the development of the hydrogen bomb.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Time out, please.
Yes.
20, right?
20 points on that bonus.
Could you tell me what was part 2 of bonus 4? I just missed it.
Sandor Marai.
M-A-R-A-E-A.
M-A-R-A-I.
Those wacky Hungarians. That was a good guess.
I guess the only one that knows.
Well, also, which sounds like a real essay, Olympia's choice or Omani Olympia's choice.
Alright. You guys ready to start? You guys as well? Okay. Toss up 6. Though it's not a broadcasting tower, Adzio is an example of one of these structures made of a hyperboloid lattice built by Shuhov in southern Ukraine. The second oldest of these structures in operation is a massively buttressed example on the Estonian island of Hiiumaa. The oldest building of this type located in Spain is the last Roman example still standing. That building in A Coruña is called the Tower of Hercules. One of these in Genoa nicknamed Lanterna, has been...
A lighthouse?
Yes.
Okay, nice.
Bonus. An artist based in this city died in an accident while building Cementland, a public art environment north of this city. For 10 points each. Named this Missouri city on the Mississippi River, the state's largest metropolitan area. Its skyline is dominated by a catenary arch.
St. Louis.
The aforementioned artist, Bob Castle, repurposed the International Shoe Building into this attraction in St. Louis. It features an eclectic variety of repurposed objects and includes extensive sculpted caverns and a 10-story slide with a Ferris wheel on the roof.
City Museum.
This southern neighborhood of St. Louis hosts a vivacious Mardi Gras celebration. The 1860 Saloon is one of many historic jazz and blues clubs in the neighborhood, which is also home to the headquarters of Anheuser-Busch.
No, I think it's like that.
Answer?
No.
I have Solard or Soulard? Soulard. Thank you. 20 points. Toss-up 7. This god tricks animals into counting to 9 so he can eat them. This god disguised himself as a magnificent bird to find out that Wulbari sent him to find darkness, the moon, and the sun. He convinced the sky god to give humans water to cool them from the sun. He trapped the Moatia dwarves to a doll using yam paste. This god gathered all the wisdom.
Anansi.
Yeah. Near the end of this film, there is a hypnotic, almost 5-minute-long sequence of slow-motion diving, for 10 points each, being this 1930s film released in 2 parts, the second of which was subtitled Festival of Beauty. Future Tarzan actor Glenn Morris reportedly had an affair with its director.
Maybe like Olympia?
That's right. Olympia documents the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. The next Summer Games to take place in Germany was in 1972, when the games in this city were marred by the kidnapping and murder of Israeli athletes.
Munich.
An intersection of politics and the Olympics not involving Germany occurred at the 1956 Melbourne Games, when this country won the blood-in-the-water water polo match, despite a player bleeding from his eye after being punched by his opponent.
Oh, yeah. Hungary?
30 points.
Oh, no. Nice.
Toss-up 8. Matthew Arnold argued that this book shouldn't be taken as a work of art. We are to take it as a piece, arguing that the author must have seen minor details like a character being late for a wedding because his shirts were packed up. Near the end of this novel, a character remembers cooking raspberries above a candle as a child. After a discussion with a peasant, restores his Christian faith following the birth of his son. The horse Frou Frou dies Yes. Name these composers of pieces that are now used as standard etudes for violin students, for 10 points each. This violin instructor at the Paris Conservatoire wrote 42 preludes and caprices. He was the dedicatee of Beethoven's Violin Sonata No. 9, which fluctuates between A major and A minor.
Okay, so they probably want Kreutzer.
This Polish violinist collected 10 etudes in his École Moderne. His first violin concerto includes a movement entitled Preghiera, or Prayer.
Szymanowski.
No, it's Henryk Wieniawski.
Okay.
This virtuoso violinist became a celebrity after he premiered his 24 caprices, which have become pedagogical tools. He wrote a set of variations on a theme from Rossini's Moses that are performed on the G string only.
Pagani.
20. Toss-up 9. A construct named for this mathematician continuously surjects onto any compact metric space by the Hausdorff-Alexandrov theorem. That set, named for this man, is homeomorphic to the set of infinite binary sequences written 2 to the blackboard bold n, and has positive measure versions that are called fat, a counterintuitive function that is constant almost everywhere and varies only on that set named for this man is called the Devil's Staircase. Removing the middle third of the
Cantor.
yes. This man wrote a mock epic about the mythical origin of corn, for 10 points each. Name this author of The Hasty Pudding, who joined men like David Humphreys, John Trumbull, and Lemuel Hopkins in forming a satirical literary society in the 1780s. Answer.
Steele.
Joel Barlow. Barlow was a member of a group known as the Wits from this location in New England, where the members resided. Answer.
Massachusetts.
Hartford. Barlow wrote a 1787 poem about the vision of this man, said to be the mariner who first unfurled an eastern banner over the western world in 1492.
Christopher Columbus.
That's right, for 10 points. This question, which appears at the conclusion to chapter 9 of a novel, is prefigured midway through the book by similar questions in a sequence including why do they live at all? This question is asked after a man says, "Now I want you to tell me just one thing more." After answering this question, at once immediately, a man sits painting in the cold air the iron New England dark. The person who answers this question is possibly spurred by it to end his freshman year at Harvard by a suicide.
Why do you get this out?
Yes.
What was the question? Why do you hate this out?
One of this group's leaders was John Elder, the fighting pastor. For 10 points each, named this vigilante group of frontiersmen that murdered 20 Susquehannock in the Conestoga Massacre before marching on Philadelphia in the aftermath of the French and Indian War.
The Paxton Boys.
Were met outside Philadelphia in Germantown by this founding father, who agreed to have the legislature review their complaints. This polymath is more famous for publishing Poor Richard's Almanac.
Franklin.
The Iroquois were finally pushed out of the frontier by this 1779 campaign organized by George Washington. This expedition terrorized Iroquois villages in response to raids by leaders such as Joseph Brant and Cornplanter.
The Sullivan Expedition.
30. It's halftime.
I have at halftime, minus 10, 310.
Yes.
Ready?
Boys. It's not good.
You couldn't tell, but they're one of the best teams at this tournament.
No.
Talking about both of them, actually.
Yeah, we ripped. I read it from earlier.
Okay, and so we've got two of those, and not that one. And then those two. Okay. The Secretary of Homeland Security, but they are in fact the head of the Department of Homeland Security. Like, in my opinion, it answers right. I just wanted to make sure what he was doing.
The jumping jack's hard.
That would be like history from, since after the Second World War, in my opinion. It could be current events, but like most of that was from like the early 2000s.
Alright.
Which, you know, according to you guys, is history.
So would there be a green history in this year?
The first one was the throwback, and then that one on, they should have two. Maybe like a different one, or another. Okay.
It's one of the weakest preventions, but I like it.
That was a very nice one. I mean, I don't think anyone else knew that.
Yeah.
That was
It's like, it's not like question, it sounds like Faulkner, but
Yes.
why do you read this?
I actually knew which book it was too, I didn't know what the answer was, so I'm
Yeah.
Well, I mean, usually.
We're on Jeopardy now, so all these are in the form of a question. Alright. You guys ready for the second half? Okay. 11. Dispersion in these systems is modeled by the Furui-Bloomer relation. One parameter used to characterize these systems equals the tangent of the amplitude ratio times e to the quantity I times the phase shift. That parameter is the complex reflectance ratio. In one measurement technique applied to these systems, linearly polarized light falls on the sample at an angle, resulting in a reflected beam with elliptical polarization. That method is ellipsometry. These systems are found in cadmium telluride solar cells and can be manufactured via spin coating, physical vapor deposition, and sputtering. For 10 points, identify the systems in which the interference of light results in iridescent patterns.
Liquid crystal.
No.
Prism.
Thin films.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Toss-up 12. An opera by this composer begins with a rehearsal of a string sextet by Flamand, who argues against Olivier that music is more powerful than words. This composer wrote a rondo beginning with the words Als ein Gott to conclude a 12-minute-long coloratura aria in which Zerbinetta advises another woman about getting over heartbreak. That aria is Großmächtige Prinzessin. In another opera by him, Octavian and Sophie.
Strauss.
Prompt.
R.
Yes.
Really?
This author wrote about Charles Arrowby, an obsessive playwright who decides to live in seclusion but encounters his first love in The Sea, the Sea. For 10 points each, name this author who also wrote The Black Prince, The Bell, and Under the Net. As a philosopher, she wrote The Sovereignty of Good, which revived Platonism in analytic moral philosophy.
Murdoch.
This other author wrote The Sea, a novel that won the 2005 Man Booker Prize. It narrates the life of art historian Max Morden as he comes to terms with the death of loved ones. Answer?
Nothing.
John Banville. Iris Murdoch and John Banville are both from this country, the birthplace of James Joyce.
UK. Or Ireland, right? Yeah, Ireland.
That is correct. 20 points. Toss-up 13. This philosopher quoted Gregory Chaitin's definition of randomness in a paper that compared the task of understanding Conway's game of life to the predictive success of folk psychology. This philosopher used the term heterophenomenology to describe a third-person approach towards understanding the mind. In his paper, Real Patterns expands on his distinction between the physical, design, and intentional stances to understanding an entity's behavior. He advocated quining qualia in one paper and proposed replacing the homuncular notion of the Cartesian.
Dennett.
That's right.
So,
The slow waves involved in gut-smooth muscle contraction originate from interstitial cells named for this person. For 10 points each, name the Spanish scientist who shared a Nobel with Golgi, whose staining method he used to create beautiful, detailed illustrations of neuronal networks.
eight-color prints.
Answer? This is Santiago Ramon y Cajal. Interstitial cells of Cajal have this capacity for self-generating rhythmic electrical activity. When this capacity of the sinoatrial node is dysfunctional, it can be supplemented with a namesake artificial device to regulate heartbeat.
Looks like
This electrical capacity. Carrying.
Answer? Pacemaker. This hormone secreted by intestinal crypt cells controls the migrating myoelectric complexes responsible for peristalsis during fasting. It is named for its role in gastrointestinal functioning. Say it again. Say it one more time.
Motilin.
Yes, that's right.
Good job.
10 points.
Pacemaker. Yeah.
Toss-up 14. The peasant Richard Gettner beseeches Countess Rosmarin Ostenburg for rescue during the 1848 uprising in Hungary in a play by this author. He also wrote a modern version of a mystery play set in Steinig in his drama about Saint Cuthman. This playwright of The Dark is Light Enough and The Boy with a Cart wrote a comedy in which Trapper Coombe is confused by a man's insistence of making new confessions. Like Gore Vidal, this author did uncredited rewrites on the Ben-Hur script, and he also wrote a play in which Nicolas de Vise claims that the right to marry Elizabeth Elliot after claiming to kill Humphrey. Janet Jordamain is accused of turning old Skips into a dog in a play by this man that starts with Thomas Mendip seeking to be executed. For 10 points, name this author of The Lady's Knot for the Burning.
Fry.
Yes. This man's ghost supposedly haunts the town of Oranienbaum, protecting children from German bombs during World War II. For 10 points each, name this ruler whose assumption to the throne was termed the miracle of the House of Brandenburg by Frederick the Great. This czar's most famous impersonator was Yemelyan Pugachev.
Peter III.
Claiming to be Peter III, the conman Stephen the Little was accepted as Tsar by the people of this prince-bishopric. This small Adriatic principality secularized under Danilo I and split Sandjak with Serbia after the First Balkan War.
Yeah,
Montenegro.
Peter III was overthrown by this woman, his wife and successor, with the help of the Orloff brothers. This Tsarina, who corresponded with Voltaire, counted Grigory Potemkin among her lovers.
Catherine the Great.
Yeah. Alright, 30 points. Toss-up 15. In monotonic games involving these things, only minimal cost separating equilibria are immune from credible deviations. Crawford and Sobel showed that these things may be noisy if two parties' preferences are not identical. Pooling equilibria occur if all players of a game choose the same form of these things. A 1973 paper by Michael Spence showed that risk-neutral employers could take advantage of these things and argued that even if acquiring college diplomas had no impact on an individual's productivity, it could increase their wages due to acting as one of these things. Peacock's tales are an example of, for 10 points, what things which, along with screening, can resolve adverse selection problems by conveying information about an agent's type to a principal.
Signal.
Yes. In a poem titled for this person's character, he is described as someone who turns his necessity to glorious gain in face of these doth exercise a power, which is our human nature's highest dower. For 10 points each, identify this title man in an 1806 poem who is described as he whom every man in arms should wish to be.
Shakespeare, what? Could be Cromwell.
Answer, no, it's Happy Warrior. Wordsworth's The Character of the Happy Warrior was written following the death of this man. This British admiral inspired C.S. Forster's Hornblower series. This writer examined the tempestuous relationship between Lord Nelson's mistress, Emma Hamilton, and her volcanologist husband in The Volcano Lover. This author of On Photography contrasted content-based and formalist hermeneutics in Against Interpretation.
Sontag.
Yes, 20. Let's get a score check.
It is currently 7350.
Toss up 16. During this proceeding, a man asked for an opinion on Richard Epstein's book, Takings, from a person supported by the testimony of Nancy Fitch and Diane Holt. David Brock said that the American Spectator hired him to write a character assassination regarding this event, which was described by another man as a high-tech lynching.
The nomination of Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas's nomination hearing.
Yes.
Good job.
Here's your bonus. Carolus Clusius was an important 16th century horticulturist. For 10 points each, Clusius was employed by Anton, a member of this German banking family. Its Augsburg scion, Jakob, was known as the Rich.
Fooker.
Starting in Vienna, Clusius' observations on the breaking virus and his breeding program helped to establish the mania for these flowers in the Netherlands.
Yeah. Tulip.
Clusius left Vienna when he was appointed to lead the Hortus Botanicus in the city. Like Alkmaar, this city was saved from Spanish capture by the breaking of dikes and was afterwards rewarded for its perseverance with the university by William I. Answer?
Rotterdam.
Leiden. 20 points. 17. The rule of St. Benedict says that monks should sleep with these objects so they can rise without delay, and says that they should not be of such bad quality that if left on the road no one would be tempted to take them, in contrast to examples of these objects used by the Egyptian monks. Individuals who have been granted the great schema have these objects decorated with the instruments of the Passion, and are given a special example of these things called the analavos. Carthusians wear an extra cloak with this ensemble as novices, which is removed after taking vows. Benedictines typically wear black examples of these clothes, and Carmelites typically wear brown.
Veils.
No. For 10 points, identify these prescribed ways of dressing sported by members of religious orders.
Cloaks.
I have habits. Toss-up 18. Peter Kennedy and Darren Hickey were among 4 telecom workers who were kidnapped and killed in this region. Residents of this region were deported to Central Asia as part of Operation Lentil.
Chechnya?
Yes.
Nice.
This writer argued for indeterminism in the open universe, which along with realism and the aim of science and quantum theory and the schism of physics, constitutes his postscript. For example, Teach named this philosopher of science who advanced the criterion of falsifiability to distinguish science from non-science. Popper advanced falsificationism in this book, which outlines a 4-step process for deduction.
I studied like science.
Time. It's the logic of scientific discovery. Popper's epigraph to the logic of scientific discovery is the quotation, "Theories are nets. Only he who casts will catch," by this German romantic philosopher, a magical realist whose other works include Fichte's Studies. Answer? Novalis. 10 points. Final, no, there's 2 more. One tumor of these cells produces a butterfly appearance when crossing the midline and classically displays pseudo-palisading necrosis. A tumor of these cells is treated with the 5/23 schedule of temozolomide and often positively stained for a type 3 intermediate filament, or fibrillary acidic protein named for them. One class of these cells comes in ramified, reactive, and amoeboid morphologies and derives from the monocyte lineage. That class is their microtype, which are phagocytic. These cells are the namesake of the most aggressive and deadly. Yes. Answer the following about the expression of group identities in politics. Arguing that traditional identity politics often ignores intragroup differences, Kimberl Crenshaw coined this term to describe the ways that different kinds of identities, such as race, sexuality, and class, act in tandem.
Intersectionality.
This Indian-born theorist used the term strategic essentialism to describe how people who shared an identity set aside their differences to achieve common goals. She translated Jacques Derrida's Of Grammatology into English.
Spivak.
Mark Fisher, also known as K-Punk, left this social media platform due to controversy over his blog post Exiting the Vampire Castle, which critiques identitarian politics. In May, a federal judge ruled that Donald Trump could not block people on this platform.
Twitter.
30 points. All right. That's right. Last toss-up. And then we have a fun tiebreaker to read at the end. In a novel by this author, the Syriana school becomes much more oppressive after its former student, Chui, comes back to lead it. Characters in a novel by this author brew a drink from the Thangeta plant to celebrate. Say it again? Yes. This artist painted a flurry of bright colors with emergent maypoles and Ferris wheels in his Battle of Lights, Coney Island, Mardi Gras, for 10 points each, named this American futurist who painted Luna Park, byproducts plants, and many depictions of Brooklyn Bridge. Answer? Joseph Stella, or Giuseppe Stella. Though he worked in America, Stella was born in this country, whose futurist movement developed after its manifesto was written by Filippo Marinetti. This futurist artist painted dynamism of a soccer player and dynamism of a cyclist, exemplifying futurist fascination with kinetic energy and modern transportation. He depicted a woman looking on as the city gets distorted by crowds of people and the street enters the house. Yes. 20 points. And if you want to play for another Smarties, here is an extra toss-up.
You gotta clear the budget, bro.
In a Lasse Hallström film, the protagonist fears that this news subject starved to death. After Gary Powers was shot down, he recounted being offered a brand of cigarettes named for this most famous trainee of Oleg Gazenko. This subject's most notable mission was timed...
Maybe like Gagarin.
What?
Gagarin.
No. Was timed to coincide with the 40th anniversary of the October Revolution. This passenger was selected ahead of Albina and Mushka, and was selected from the streets of Moscow because of her... Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now that
All
had
right,
to be
good game.
right.
Let's hear the final score.
140, 395. Good game, everyone.
GG.